Hi everyone, and welcome back to Mina Wonders. So usually I don't do TBRs on this channel just because I find them to be a lot of pressure, and I heard about this phenomenon, which I think is true, where like if you tell someone your plans, you think that it's keeping you accountable, but actually you kind of lose momentum for what it is that you want to do. And most of the time, like if you tell people you're gonna work out, if you tell people you're gonna do this, you will most likely end up not doing it. And that's basically why I stopped doing TBRs. However, recently I've sort of begun to see the TBR in a new light, where it's also a documentation of talking about what you wanted to read at the time, regardless of whether or not you actually read it. I feel like it's still something interesting to look back on, and yeah. I also feel like it's fun to talk about certain books that you want to pick up, and it's also nice to see at the end of the month like what it is that you ended up picking up and which ones you decided to forgo, like for a different experience, etc. So anyway, without further ado, here are some books that I'm going to be attempting to read in the month of July. So first, I'll talk about a book that I am already reading. That is The Miracles of the Niame General Store by Keigo Higashino. This book is something I'm reading for a special video. If you know, you know. So this book is about, obviously, as the title suggests, the Niame General Store. Basically, the Niame General Store is set in this small town, and it's become kind of famous locally for getting advice. So people put letters in the mail slot and then they get advice back, and apparently the advice is very good advice. And it's kind of funny because this isn't a spoiler either. This happens like in the first few sections of the book. We find out that the people writing in are mostly from the 80s, and the Niame General Store is unique because there is kind of a time warp or a time portal in there. So when they leave the letters in the mailbox, it actually gets sent into the future. And so we have like a lake house situation, except it's a lot more interesting than the lake house, because the people who are in present day or in the future receiving these letters are actually these three guys, and it's a very sort of Oliver Twist situation where they're sort of a gang of friends, and they're hiding out in the Niame General Store because they had committed petty crime, and basically they're hiding from the authorities. And so they end up seeing these letters, and they end up responding to them and putting them in the milk basket, which is what the legend sort of says. So that's where people go to kind of get it, and they're kind of shocked at first because they don't see anyone coming to get the letters, but the letters disappear. And eventually, toward the end of the first section, they figure out that it has something to do with wibbly wobbly timey wimey. And so yeah, I'm enjoying this so far. I think it's a very interesting book, and I wonder how much further they're gonna carry this, and I wonder what the end reveal is. I have my suspicions, but I will get back to you in my wrap-up, hopefully without being too spoilery. The next thing that I want to read is The Seventh Day by Yu Hua. I'm very interested in reading this, although I am going to be going into it blind. I saw this recommended somewhere very highly, and so I am very interested in reading it, but I don't really know much about it, which is exactly the situation that I want for that special video that I'm filming. Up next, I want to read 2 Shakespeare plays. So I decided to choose one comedy and one tragedy. The comedy I chose is Twelfth Night. This was my favorite back in high school or grade school. I think I was like in 6th grade, so right on the cusp of going to high school. And yeah, I remember really liking it. I'm interested to see if I will still like it, although I feel like I still will. I feel like of Shakespeare's comedies, this is one that has aged pretty gracefully, I think, at least compared to stuff like Taming of the Shrew. I'm also going to be reading Macbeth for my tragedy, and yeah, I'm interested in reading this because actually I have never read Macbeth. In high school, what we were required to read from Shakespeare was Romeo and Juliet, and then in college and in masters it was mostly poetry because I am sort of specializing in poetry. So yeah, interesting and very exciting for me. I've heard great things about this play. I mean, obviously, it's Shakespeare. Next is a Filipino authored read, and this is something I'm really committed to this year, which is making sure that at least one of the books that I read every month is authored by a Filipino author and has something to say that is relevant to our society. So for this month, it's going to be Elites and Ilustrados in Philippine Culture by Carolyn S. Howe. So Carolyn S. Howe is a Filipino critic, and I heard from my friend Ram that she's very good. He praises her highly, and he says that if I read from her, I will sort of be forever changed and no longer be able to read from other Filipino critics. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but I'm always down for an explorative experience, and I'm very happy also with this book in that it was available which is such a sad thing to say, but yeah, I'm excited to read it also just because I feel like Ilustrado culture has really carried over into the Filipino middle class right now and into our consciousness. For those of you guys who may not be familiar with what an ilustrado is, basically they were Filipino scholars of the Spanish government, so they were some of the privileged few that had access to education abroad. Yeah, they were basically able to do things that were at the time only available to the Spanish here in the Philippines. And I'm interested in this because I feel like a big part of the reason why the Filipino middle class are kind of obsessed with studying abroad and kind of obsessed with these affirmations, I guess, from the Western world also has to do with how being an ilustrado, being elite, and those things have kind of seeped into our consciousness. And and yeah, it's something that I think at this point is kind of unavoidable, but I still want to know more about it. Next, I'm going to be reading Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. So this is the second installment in her series that follows the whole Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII, Jane Seymour thing. And I'm very excited for this because toward the end of the first book, like, you know that shit is about to hit the fan. So obviously from the title of this, I feel like the shit is gonna hit the fan in this one. And so I'm really, really excited. Also, I'm so happy that they had this edition, which is the pocketbook edition. I was talking to, I think it was Krisha from Third World Book Nerd, and just saying that as we've gotten older, we really appreciate these kind of pocketbooks because they're so light, they're easy to store, you can read while lying down, which is like the #1 tita requirement. And speaking of series that I want to continue this month, I'm also going to be reading The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferrante. This is #2 in her Neapolitan novels, and I read the first one last year, which was My Brilliant Friend, and I'm super excited to read this. I have no idea actually if it's still going to be following Lenu and Lena, but I'm super interested in reading it because I am in love with the way that Elena Ferrante writes. For the last book on this TBR, I'm going to be reading Deaf Republic by Ilya Kaminsky. Finally, the book that everybody I know in the poetry world has been recommending to me for years. Yeah. So that's it for this TBR and for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know also what you are intending to pick up in this lovely month of July. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!